Greetings fellow Earthlings and welcome to this tiny garage. Since the very beginning of this project, there is a phrase where I come from that is quite popular, and that is never putting lipstick on a pig. And what they mean by that, and what I was thinking when I had this project, is it's very tempting with a beautiful car like this to start polishing things and painting things and all that kind of fun stuff that you can just order and bolt on. And I wanted to make sure I didn't get carried away with that and go through the car and make sure that it was even worth the time to keep going. And so far, really, while I have spent some money, mostly on the scissor lift, to be honest, I haven't spent much money on the car, but that's got to change now. You can't fix these cars with paper mache and dreams. You do have to spend some cash, and that's starting now. We've taken it apart. There's no more to take apart. The engine bay is completely empty, and as we mentioned before, the whole point of one of these engines existing is to turn the crankshaft, and there is the crankshaft right there, and so there is no more to take apart. But now we need to fix this and put it back together, and we're going to start with the IMS shaft itself. Since day one, this has been the mission to try to figure out what's wrong with it and how to fix it. It's a famous part on these Porsche 996 cars. Now, the part we're talking about that's particularly famous is the bearing at the end here. Now, this bearing seems to be a Porsche bearing. It's not an LN Engineering bearing. It could be the original bearing. There is no real way to know unless I can find that in some of the records that haven't come up yet. However, it does feel lovely, but there's no way that I'm going to put it back into the car like that. Any of you who know these cars will know what I'm talking about. There's no way you would take this engine apart to this degree and not replace one of these. And now, while I can go to the Porsche dealer and say, hello, one of those please, and put that in, that doesn't have the other benefits that purchasing an LN Engineering bearing has. Now, there are other companies besides LN Engineering that have options for bearings, and I'm sure some of them are very good. They also don't offer the benefits that LN Engineering has, specifically the name LN Engineering. And so if I send this to them and they replace it, I will get the new bearing, which has a record of 0 fail. It's a ceramic ball bearing dual row upgrade. And so that's one aspect of it. It has a 2-year, 24,000 mile warranty, which is lovely. But also I can say when I sell the car that it has one of those bearings in it. And that is a major resale point. And that is one of the biggest reasons for going with LN Engineering over anyone else, because no other company, even the Porsche original part, no other company has the same weight behind it as the LN Engineering bearing.
Hit the notification bell, it's up there.
Yes, please. Now, when I started taking this whole thing apart, and I'm sure many of you were thinking the same thing, we had to get those special tools in order to remove the bearing from the engine. Now, if you buy an LN Engineering bearing, they will rent you the tools for free. They'll send them to you and you can use that, so it's not a problem at all. But then as I took the car apart and the engine apart more, and I'm taking the casings apart, I'm thinking, how am I supposed to use that tool? And it turns out, as I touched on previously last week, that it makes it really easy in a way. What you do then is you just send this to LN Engineering and they'll pop a new one in the end, and then you just bolt it back in. It gets rid of all of that aspect of the fitment of the bearing. Now, in addition to that, I want to have them pin the IMS shaft. We talked about that before in the written report that I got from that Porsche independent specialist that saw the car right after it broke, essentially, with the previous owner. They mentioned, hey, you might want to get the IMS shaft, or the IMS out, and pin it or weld it. And that seemed like an incredibly distant mission at the time, but here it is. This is the thing we have to do that to. Now, welding is one thing. What we're trying to do is stop these sprockets from moving independent of each other. And I'm sure there are some fantastic welders out there that do this on a regular basis and could touch a little weld in there in just the right place and do the job. But the concern with welding is that it creates so much heat, you run the risk of warping and creating more problems than you might have had in the first place. Whereas with pinning, they drill, I believe. We'll see. I'm going to take some before and after pictures. They drill in there and then they put a little pin, and then that means that sprocket can't move. Now, I thought that they were pinning all the sprockets, but they don't. They pin the main drive sprocket at the front here. Like I said, we'll compare the picture for when it comes back and we'll know exactly what they did. That is the sprocket that takes the power straight from the crankshaft, which is right here. Okay. Then that power, it's the reason why the intermediate shaft exists. It then turns these two smaller sprockets and they go off to bank 1 and bank 2 and power all the timing and the cams and the valves, etc. And so that's the point of it. We don't want those moving independently of each other because that will change the timing. LN Engineering will tell us if there has been any run out, meaning did it slip? And so they will clean it, they will test it for run out, and then they will pin it, and then they will install the new IMS bearing, the ceramic dual row with a 0 failure rate, and they will send it back. If the run out is too much, if this did slip too much, then they won't do that and you have to buy a new one. And I think it's like maybe $1,000, $1,500, something like that for another one of these guys, and then you have to get that, whatever service you want done to that on top of that. So prices. What I say before is you can't fix these cars with dreams and paper mache. You do need cash. And so to have it pinned and cleaned and inspected, that is $375. To have the bearing installed, installation is free, but to have it installed or to buy the bearing is $900. And so that's the first thing we have to spend, $900 for the bearing, $375 to get the IMS shaft lovely and pinned and ready for its future in this car. Obviously, we need to weigh this IMS shaft to ship it, but I also want to weigh it in order to keep a running total of how much the majority of the things in this engine weigh. Now, besides just being a little obsessive compulsive about it, what I want to know is how much does the engine weigh? Because when I was trying to lower the engine, I bought this hydraulic table, which is rated for 1,000 pounds. And from what I could find online, that seemed like, yeah, that should be enough. But, and I didn't mention this up to now, when the entire engine and transmission was on there, this did sink a little. And on the handle, you could tell it was having a hard time. When you tried to lower it, it would just do nothing, and then poof, fall quite fast. And I would like to know then, really, do you need something that's a 1,500 pound rating to be safe? Because I suspect that this engine does weigh a significant amount more than 1,000 pounds when you have the engine and the transmission together. Therefore, you probably should have a different hydraulic table to the one that I was using. Anyway, how much does the IMS shaft weigh? Here we go. Hold back your excitement. 5 pounds and 11 ounces. All right, so we're going to stick this in a box. I have a box right here. This is a telescoping box from FedEx that's been cut down. Porsche Special Tool 9632. So here, that's a picture of a vise that I clamped onto the hydraulic table with a clamp. And then these are two 5mm aluminum rods that I bought off Amazon for $9. You're wondering, what am I doing? Well, Porsche Tool 9632 is designed to hold the VarioCam pads so you can take them out. So here, that is a die and a die holder. The die was $12 from Amazon. The die holder was $8. I've never used anything like this before, and I'm just going for it after taking it out of the packet. Putting the die holder on there and just starting to turn it left, because we need a left-handed thread for this tool. Now, there is no reason at all for this tool to be left-handed thread. Porsche made it that way just to make it difficult for you to work on your own car. And it's very sharp. Look at that. I was pressing down lightly and it just immediately cut the thread like it was nothing. Then also from Amazon, I got these left-handed 5mm 0.8 pitch nuts. They were $8 for a bag of them. I had found online, some people had found left-handed 5mm rods at some place in the former Czech Republic, something crazy like that. But in the end, I just went on Amazon once I kind of knew what I needed, and I found it there. There, I'm using a screwdriver to deburr, I think is the name of it. Just a piece of metal on that thread that didn't come off. So there we go. It took a while to get used to the whole lefty-tighty thing. But as you can see, that does work. And that's what it's supposed to screw into, is the base plate on the solenoid for the VarioCam. Here what I'm doing is just measuring up. I have to put threads in the top part. It will make a lot more sense when you see the final tool. And just kind of marking how low the threads need to go in order to be able to tighten that solenoid up. And then marking at the top there where the threads need to start from. Now there are other ways of doing this. You can use a clamp just to compress that VarioCam pad. But I watched someone using the real tool online, and when you're putting it in especially, it just makes it joyful that you can put it in and then loosen the tension on it and have it all go back into place under control. I chose aluminum for these rods because it's very soft. Copper could be a way to go as well. Also, this car is almost all aluminum, the engine at least, so why not? This thread is much longer, which is why I did it second, so I'd have a little chance to practice on the other side. Now here, just as you saw there, just placed it on top, pressed ever so lightly, and it kind of grabs and pulls itself down. And then I'm using the WD-40 as a lubricant there. You can tell if you do a few turns that it kind of gets a bit stiffer, and you need to put more lube on. All of the parts to make this tool, the materials and the tools, were a total of about $37. And as I'm sure you can see there, there's enough material to make probably 4 of them, maybe more. Look at those threads, it's amazing. When you're taking it off, the threads, it's as if it was cut by a machine. They work really well. Wire brush there to try to clean it up a little bit. All right then, my BMW screwdriver deburring tool. Then a washer and one of those left-handed nuts. There are no left-handed washers, in case anyone's wondering. And so there we go, throw that guy in there, tightening into the bottom. And then as you tighten that 8mm left-handed nut, you see it just compresses it perfectly. And that makes it easy to get out, obviously. But like I said, when you put it back in, it's nice to have it under control, that you can get it all in place and then just loosen that nut and it's all done. Now here I kind of expected the VarioCam solenoid to just pop out, but as you'll see here, the VarioCam pads themselves are very worn and the chain is lodged kind of in the grooves. You can see there on the backside in particular. There we go. Now again, any of you watching this that own one of these cars are probably thinking, oh my god, I need to replace my VarioCam pads. And you're probably right. Now, after a lot of searching, I did find this tool available for sale in Europe for $120 plus shipping. You could make it yourself, it would cost less, and you would get it much quicker. As I mentioned last week, the hydraulic table from Harbor Freight has never managed to keep its rubber mat on top. You can see the remnants of the glue from the factory that manufactured it there. Based on all of your advice, I'm doing everything you all said. So starting off with cleaning the metal surface with brake cleaner, and then using 150 grit sandpaper to roughen that up a little bit. And then finally rubbing alcohol to clean up the last part. And then for the mat itself, the same thing, cleaning it with brake cleaner and then going over that with 150 grit sandpaper. Following up at the end with rubbing alcohol. And then here's my contribution to the mix, is this polyurethane glue. I'm not sure if you've ever used this before. It's construction glue. If you ever want to attach something to something else and leave it there for eternity, then this is the stuff you want to use. I then jumped around on top of it liberally, then found all the heavy things in the garage and put them on top of the rubber mat while the glue was setting. Hey, if you like these videos, please consider clicking that subscribe button. It does help. It lets me know that you want to see more of them, and maybe more of Amber.
As luck would have it, the FedEx truck just arrived and dropped off these little beauties. And so these, I hope, are the main bearings for the bearing carrier here. So let's take a looky-see. All right, there we go. Yeah, so that looks pretty nice. Now, these main bearings look almost unworn. I don't know, they look in very good shape. And these bearings that I got for it are the Porsche original bearings. And so they apparently are very good and more than adequate to put straight back in. And we're going to talk about this in more detail next week. I'm actually still waiting on the assembly lube that I'm going to use. I found what I hope is the best assembly lube on planet Earth, but it took a while to get here and it's not here yet. And so next week, hopefully we should start putting some of this back together. Now, that's that. There are 7 locations for these plain bearings on the crank bearing carrier, and therefore you get 14 of these because there's halves of each of those. Now I did order the thrust bearings, but I don't see them. They did charge me for them, and these bearings, so the main bearings for the bearing carrier, were $180. Slightly less than you would pay at Porsche. These were from Pelican Parts. They're about $9 each at Pelican Parts, and these exact same parts from Porsche are $16 each or so. So definitely a savings there. So $180 for the main bearing carrier bearings. Now, we might as well look at what we got from Hartech UK now. And so these little fellers here, look how cute they are. There are 12 of them, because each half of these are the big end bearings, and they go onto the end of the conrod right here. That's one of them, and these are, like we spoke about before, slightly wider. The idea being there is that you the wider bearing is able to bear that load more evenly and hopefully stop this kind of little wear pattern. You don't really see any wear on the main bearings, but as we spoke about in last week's video, you can definitely see this wear spot on all of the bearings on the big end. Anyway, so these little fellas, they're a little special. They're something that you might put into a race car, but they are totally fine. You can put them into a regular road car, but that does change the price. So these are $350 for those little fellers right there, but they solve a known problem with this engine, and so that's magic, really. All right, that's that. What else did we get? We also got this fella, which is a dial bore gauge. Some of you were asking if I was going to check out the bore of the cylinders and see if it was perfectly round and all that kind of good stuff. Apparently this is what you use to do that. I haven't looked at this yet, but there you go, that's one of those, and hopefully we'll get into this next week because there's one thing I do want to know, and that is how much clearance there is in the cylinders, because I said last week that the coating on the skirts of these pistons, which from the factory is a ferrostan coating, and that is an iron-based coating. Some people seem to call it tinning, and it's just there to, it's sacrificial really, and it reduces friction. And I've been told that these are in such good shape that they really could go straight back into the engine, though I would like to redo that coating. And this ferrostan coating doesn't seem to exist on planet Earth anymore. Perhaps somewhere in Europe there is some factory that still uses it, but it seems to be that the industry has moved on and it's just not something they do anymore. And the coating that I talked about last week, which was $26 per piston, is a dry film lubricant from a company called Calico Coatings on the east coast of America. And I just don't know if that would work or not. After speaking to some people, it seems like there's a Xylan coating, which is a group of coatings that are these super low friction coatings that are a more modern approach to that idea, and they use them on Formula One engines and aircraft and that kind of thing. And I spoke to someone who does that, and I could send them to them and they would coat it, but they are 1 millimeter thick. The coating is 1 millimeter thick on each side of the piston, and so I don't know if that's a good idea or not. Could I be better off leaving it as it is? Should I do the Xylan coating? Is ferrostan available in some place that I just haven't found? What do you guys think? If you have any information, please let me know in the comments.
So this week we did actually have to spend some money on parts for the car. We started off with the IMS pinning, that was $375. To get the IMS bearing put in there is $900. The main bearings for the bearing carrier were $180, and then the big end bearings were $350. A grand total this week of $1,805. Woohoo!
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time.